What's up, everyone? Welcome to episode 17 of my AI native search startup journey. I do these sessions to share how I'm building my own, AI search platform, and I'm building it from scratch by myself. And in this video, I want to highlight what I mean by AI native in my case. And there are two things that I want to sort of call out. One is how I go about designing, planning, crafting the vision, coming up with the design and architecture, executing on the architecture, coming up with tasks, and then coding and testing and verification. So that's one batch of items that you have to work on to build something from scratch. And that I am pursuing it with coding LLMs and AI. So I can do that now because we have access to them. So that's great. That's one thing when I mean what I mean by AI native. Everything is designed with an AI companion, more than one AI companion. I've done videos in the past where I talk about how I use multiple LLMs because they give me diverse opinions, diverse feedback, and I get to see different sort of viewpoints, and then I become the decision maker or mediator. I decide how to sort of go about, and oftentimes before my decision, I go through a bunch of iterations, asking questions. What about this? What about this? I'm not happy with this. And then we land and then we go about doing things. So that's how I work on the vision. That's how I craft the architecture documents with the coding elements. That's how I do the entire coding execution. It's a lot of iterations, a lot of back and forth. It's not just go. It's not vibe coding at all in that sense. And oftentimes I'll jump in and make some edits as well when need be. But most of the time, the coding LLMs do pretty good. And these days, even if I spot something, I resist the urge to make the change myself and just ask the coding LLMs to do the work. The two coding LLMs I use the most are Claude Opus 4.5 and Gemini. I'm sorry, not Gemini, Codex. I do use Gemini, but on the side, mostly for short-term work, documents, analysis, root cause analysis, things like that. I have yet to develop confidence in Gemini. It's very eager to just go about and try to solve something, but often the work is very shallow. So that's really the big problem. It's good for vibe coding. It'll do some amazing things, but when you have a large code base, for me, for my task, it has struggled. Like it just goes about and says, does its thing and done. The thinking level is also not as high. And probably because the Opus models and the Codex models I use, Opus 4.5, set the thinking to the max. And then Codex CL, Codex 4. Sorry, Codex 5.2. Also, I've set it to ultra high reasoning. And so maybe that's part of the reason. But Gemini too, I've set it to the max reason, but it just doesn't come close for a large code base of mine. But anyway, those are the two LLMs I use the most, and then Gemini on the side. I'm excited to incorporate Grok. Grok is getting better and better and better, but I've yet to incorporate it in my workflow. So that's one thing. How I go about even planning, thinking about what to build, and then coming up with what are my options, and then deciding, and then executing. All that is done with AI. So that's part one of AI. How, what is AI native, or what I mean by AI native. And the second part is how, let me see how to best phrase this. How the runtime or how the system itself works with LLMs. So part one, I'm using, or the first part that I mentioned, I'm using LLMs and AI to design and build. And then the second thing is that I'm using these AI LLMs as part of the back end that I'm building and the front end I'm building to power the search experience. So, I use LLMs too. understand the query, to make API calls, to distill, to review the quality, a whole bunch of things, right? The multiple steps in the query processing flow or prompt processing flow, and LLMs are involved throughout. So that's another way it's AI native. The one part that in my architecture I'm not AI native is there is a certain workflow that's static today, but the way I've thought about it is down the road, I should be able to design or fine tune an AI model that can operate even the workflow. Like I can fine tune it with different sort of real world queries and sort of the trace that we followed, and then should be able to fine tune this LLM. So eventually, even the workflow is completely AI native. And that's sort of the end goal for someone like me, where everything is intelligence based. But today, day one that I'm trying to build, it's pretty close. Like there is a workflow, like we want to do this, this, and this, but every workflow individual or every phase in the workflow is individually powered by LLMs in a smart way, like without wasting LLM resources, takes up time, costs money, in a smart way. And how do we, how do you use them effectively throughout, and asking every time whether you need it or not, or can we combine more than one task with one sort of LLM request when you put a lot of burden on one LLM request and you want to break out, and how you want to fork your decision making from the output of LLM to sort of the next step, which is dynamically chosen based on the output of the first LLM call. So it's like a tree, and that whole tree is sort of dynamic, completely AI or LLM powered. So that's how what I mean by AI native. So what I even think of building and go about building the documentation and the coding uses AI, and the actual product backend, the platform uses AI to power the search queries. And so that's what I mean by AI native. And I have some screenshots here that I want to show you. This is a screenshot of how I work with sort of, I think in this case, maybe this might be Claude, how I work with Claude to identify, what model I should use for different tasks. Because the query processing pipeline is so long and so many steps, some are optional. But there's so many things that need to be done. And then not all models are same, and when to use what. So this is kind of me working with the coding LLMs to kind of help me, right? This is sort of part one of what I was talking about, being AI native, working with AI to even decide what to do and how to do. What I'm not showing is the vision document I have, the technical architecture I have. Maybe I'll share that in the future. But even that was crafted with LLMs. Of course, with multiple iterations and a lot of feedback that I have. And I share my notes sometimes. So I have my notes like, this is my tenets, and this is what are must-haves, and why I'm starting this, why I'm doing this. And I feed that in the prompt, the context. This is another sort of screenshot where, I think Claude or Codex, I forget, it's like, did the research online, and this is as of today or as of, a few days ago, I don't know, January. What are the Gemini models? Right now I'm using Gemini models to kind of just keep the costs low and get some Google credits, Google Cloud credits that can support, because I'm paying everything from my pocket. I have no funding at all. Everything I'm doing is paid from my own sort of savings. And Gemini sort of helps me out if Google can give me Google Cloud credits. So these are sort of the Gemini, and so I asked, and sort of, these LLMs sort of went out and sort of came up with, hey, these are the options, and this is when you want to use this. And then, I save this and sort of give it access to the LLM so that they can make the right decision. Now, here's an example of how I'm using LLMs during the runtime, or when the product, or when product is trying to make decision, the backend is trying to make a decision in a particular stage of the query processing. So here it was like before, there were some, hard-coded things when I had first built this, like, oh, if the query is like a computational query, do this, or, if something is this, then call YouTube, whatever, right? And then the right is like how I can be completely LLM first or AI native. And so there are no fixed heuristics or scores or, you know, particular sort of intent, like query types or intent types, things like that, particular fields that drive. I want to be as sort of loose but smart and intelligent as possible. So this is sort of an example of how, you know, the whole backend system can be intelligence driven. And the nice part of this is LLMs understand multiple languages. And so your dynamic logic, it automatically becomes multilingual. And then one of the tenets I have for my backend of building is from day one, it has to be multilingual and global. It's just something I always wanted. And then thanks to these LLMs, they kind of help me out. So this is an example of how I can be, the right side is sort of where I want to be. The left side was, you know, where I started, just kind of get the platform going first time around, and now I'm making it completely AI native. This is an example of sort of multilingual query, and how I'm working with AI to kind of, hey, come up with some sort of solution. In this case, there's sort of no fallback, something fails, geocoding in this case, and sort of, you know, what's a good fallback. And I'm working with the AI to come up with a plan. Again, this is just a classic example of if I have a problem, I work with the AI to like dissect it, come up with a plan, see if I'm happy with it. I have to go back and forth, get some diverse opinion. Sometimes I'll type it up, this is what I want, and then sort of off we go. This is an example of so just research that the LLMs did, right? Like, hey, I want this. I want, you know, how do I improve the quality of results, or how do I include more real-time information or more content from the web or web sources like weather, you know, research papers, Wikipedia, things like that. And sort of I asked the AI to do the research, come up with a plan, and then again did a lot of iteration back and forth. And then, you know, we came up with some plan strategies like, oh, strategy combined works great for 4 providers. But if you have many providers, you may have to come up with specialist roles, because, you know, otherwise it would be kind of overkill to call 20 different systems at the same time for every query. This is another example of just research that LLMs are doing to kind of help me out. It's nice. This is an example of more front end. Like, how can you even build the front end, the UI, completely sort of intelligence based? And that's, again, my vision goes full stack. I want the full stack system to the extent possible, completely AI based. And because it scales as the models get smarter, my system automatically gets smarter. And if you have these rules and show this label, that label, if this, if then, you kind of become very brittle. It's hard to do because every LLM call costs money, and also introduce latency. These calls are slow. LLMs are not that fast, at least the big ones or medium-sized models. So here is like a first take of how we can build an LLM-driven display, right? We have all these sort of there's a phase in the query processing called distillation, and I use a distiller LLM for it. All these LLMs, by the way, in the future will be fine-tuned for my needs. Today, I'm using out of the box with few shot prompts. But this is great. Like this, the picture we discussed in this, what you see is sort of awesome. But this, like the North Star, there are certain problems if you go this far, because in this case, you know, the LLM will have to do a lot of work. Not only will have to identify, in this case, the coverage score and gaps and things like that, subqueries, but also like come up with labels for display. That's too much. But again, this is part of the discussion, iteration. So it also shows that we haven't reached yet a point where you can just tell the LLM or AI to do something and it will go off. It most likely will go off and do something, but how will it know what your vision is, what your architecture is, what level of detail, like how your thinking is at every level of detail? You have to be very interactive. So as of today, if you want to build what I'm building, you have to be extremely technical. Let's see. This sort of the next prompt I'd asked after the LLM came up with that proposal, or I guess both of us, I had sort of pushed the LLM. I think that was Claude to push it like, hey, like, I want to be intelligence driven. What can I do? I'm not happy with just rules if greater than zero point 0.7 or if this show this label always in the UI. Because based on the query and how we process the query, like I said earlier, the flow of query processing might be different, and we want to show the user what we're doing to be transparent. But then based on the path, the labels could be different, especially if you want to call out external systems or entities, like if the query is about United States or Elon Musk or what have you. How do you do that? Uh, the, because all the calls are all LLM calls, intermittent LLM calls are not English based. Only the final LLM call translates in the user's language. So like so I was like telling the LLM, hey, does this put a lot of burden on the distiller? Should we simplify? Like this is great, but like we want to be practical is I guess what I'm trying to tell the LLM. And then the LLM like, oh yeah, sure. It does some research. I ask it to like search on the web, search research papers on archive, find out some of the big players, what are they doing. So here it did some research on 3 leading AI search platforms. It did on Perplexity, Google, and ChatGPT, and it found out that none of them show, in this case, confidence scores in their UI.. That's overkill. So this is sort of the part back and forth, all right? What we're doing, like we want our North Star is this, but sometimes you kind of over-index on one side, and also sometimes you think you want to be transparent and show the user what you're doing, but sometimes it's too much. Like the users won't even know what that means. So, what is the sort of where do you draw the line? And it's different every time. And so this is the game you're playing. If you're me, like my everyday, the role I play is sort of that mediator and kind of making sure that we do the right thing while while adhering or while sticking to our vision and architecture, and where you'll have to sort of index a little bit to the left or right based on the scenario or the use case. And so here it does some research. I mean, it's pretty good, right? And then it also does, some more research, and it lists all the sources. It's like, oh, UI rendering. Also, this is the latest research on other websites and Medium and Archive. There's a paper from Archive and some blogs and things like that. All this great work. And so it did all that for me. So this, again, being AI native, the AI is helping me research based on my instruction there. It won't do it automatically. We haven't reached the stage yet where the AI will automatically just do the right thing. You have to instruct. That's why today it's still difficult to build a very large-scale, complex system completely with AI in a hands-free fashion. We'll get there. I don't think I have my doubts, but today, that's the state. Here's an example of then where we sort of landed. The distiller LLM will do A and B, subqueries, etc. The LLM essentially will decide the content, but the UI decides the layout. So we kind of broke off. That's too much to ask the LLM to do. And then we'll just kind of separate and let the UI do its UI thing. And then we'll have some fixed labels that are localized for most popular languages. And this way, you just kind of get the best of both worlds. You have a dynamic UX, dynamic labels, but we know they're sort of batch. At the end of the day, we'll have a superset of labels that we'll work with, and we'll localize that superset. And so it's like a win-win. So yeah, that's kind of where I wanted to stop this video. And what I wanted to highlight was when I say AI native, what I meant. So it's sort of both parts. One is you're using AI to, brainstorm, crystallize your ideas, work out the vision, come up with the architecture, look at various options, do the ask the AI to do the research, have that sort of back and forth, while you being grounded, as in me being grounded in my vision. The AI sort of comes up with all the options, but I have to be the mediator. And so that's how I sort of am designing and building it, and then using AI to power the back end and the front end to the extent possible. So it's completely, at the end of the day, my vision is completely an intelligence-based system, an AI-built system, end to end. And I'll draw the line sometimes to the left or right, just for practical purposes. Like the workflow I said is, static, somewhat. I don't want to say the workflow is static, but there are phases that are static. But every phase, what happens in that phase is completely dynamic. What happens? So you have to sort of understand the query, sort of process the query, do some routing to kind of fetch external data, distill it, things like that. Those are necessary steps. But like I said, in the future, even that should be completely driven by a fine-tuned AI model. And I suspect that's what Grok and Gemini and all these teams are doing. They have access to the resources. I don't have funding, I don't have GPUs, and I'm also just one person doing all this. So for me, I'm very happy with where I've landed. It's sort of it truly is AI native, but where the gaps are, there is a path to make it AI native down the road in the future if there's value. So use AI to power the backend and use AI to build the backend or to build the platform. So that's kind of what I mean by AI native. It's been great. I love what I do, and I'm so glad I have the opportunity to do this. I quit Google to build this, and it's been over a year sort of on it. It's been more than 2 years since I quit, but the first year I was just trying to figure out how to go about, and the last year I've sort of been on it, and I can't wait to sort of put this out in sort of an alpha or a pre-alpha, and see people's sort of thoughts and follow it up with APIs. So a big part of the vision is to make what I've built available to others in terms of APIs so they can build upon and be a alternate player in this space. But this is just scratching the surface. We're just at the beginning. I have big dreams. So hope to see you in the next one. See ya.